Okay, give me one sec. Unmute.
Recording in progress.
Call the meeting back to order, and we will pick up with 10E. We amended the agenda, so 10E goes ahead of the other new business items.
Perfect.
So we'll go right into that.
Mayor, would you like for us to do public comment on all the?
Oh,
business
yes. Yeah, let's do that. So we'll have the public comment for 10A through E, or E, A, B, C, D. And then we'll go into 10E.
items? Perfect. Anyone joining us in the audience, feel free to come out to the podium, state your name and address under there. Otherwise, anyone joining us virtually can press *9. If you're joining us from a phone, or click reactions and raise your hand if you're joining us via an electronic device. Mayor and Council, at this time, no one's raising their hand, so we'll have to get started.
Perfect.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. We received a request from a resident, Craig, who is asking for the city to consider a construction access change and looking at accessing for construction sites for the Amberley development and later phases of Bellwether, and changing where that construction access happens. Currently, there are some concerns over noise and disruption of construction, the disruption that the construction traffic creates for the current residents of Bellwether. When the city final platted the final phase, or when Bellwether was platted, the final phase only connected to Hunter's Ridge, and since then the Blair Home piece was added in, and then which created an additional access north. When the city was looking at the initial construction traffic, we had required, if they used Hunter's Ridge to complete an overlay, if they were using that, but when Amberley and Bellwether came, those other phases of Amberley and Bellwether came in, there was a phase to the north, so it does not require the developer currently to participate financially in that overlay. And so with that, we have Craig here, who can speak to his request and take any questions that you might have on the request.
Sounds good. Craig, if we could just get your name and address for the record.
Yes, Craig Espelin, 19251, 102nd Place, Corcoran.
Thank you.
Council members, Mr. Mayor, and esteemed staff, thank you for taking some time. The concerns we have about the single entry point have now gotten a little bit more aggressive. We've been in contact with both MnDOT and are working to get in contact with Kevin Anderson from Hennepin County. MnDOT's feedback is one single entry point for all of this construction is a public safety hazard. That was MnDOT's feedback to us. So what this is now is you've got a single pinch point entryway off of Stieg Road that all the construction is taking place a quarter to a half mile back in. And so going past all of these homes, there are 240 homes occupied, 40 plus that are in some state of closure, and another 274 homes to be completed, all of which are in this construction pathway. So that means for the next 3 years, everyone living on this street and the streets beyond will experience this construction traffic. What we found is, especially on Saturday, when for some reason that seems to be a very high traffic day, it's like going through an earthquake in San Diego, a minor earthquake. Things shake on the walls, things move on the shelves, damage to the walls internally, and it's become something that's, quite frankly, an annoyance. Can you go to the next slide, please? We've got 4 opportunities to do something different, and none of these should cost the city money, because this would be a requirement of the developer because of this public safety hazard. So this is the Hunter's Ridge connection that is going to happen at some point in the future. Our proposal here, our recommendation is traffic comes in off of Stieg Road, it exits through Hunter's Ridge. For the vast majority of the traffic, they will be empty going out, minimizing any future damage for that piece of Hunter's Ridge. This would be the cheapest option. The base roads are already there, you can already see them. It would just take a 30-foot connector, and it could even be a temporary connector for right now, so that the trucks could exit that way. If you go to the next one, there is a temporary road going to this cul-de-sac coming through Amberley for all the construction traffic that is in use now. It is not a finished road, it is not even a preferred road, because here on the entry point is gravel, and there is not supposed to be an entry point there, but there is one there today. So it needs a little work to get around from Amberley into the back end of Bellwether. And this would be our recommendation number 2. A lot more logistical challenges here, but still could be done. If you go to the next slide, and this is the main entrance for, let's see, where are we here? Yep, this is the main entrance to Bellwether, and there's an existing road that jumps back here, temporary road to get back and connect here. We don't prefer this one only because we're moving our problem to be a problem for these folks, but in our meeting with Matt and one of his other officers and Mayor McKee, we found that there will be no construction traffic coming into any of this off of 30 because of the width of the road, which begs a new question of when this gets developed, where's traffic going to come in? And our fear now is this is the new construction traffic route for this development. If 30 can't be used, which the conversation was that without making 30 wider without the turn lanes, 30 can't be used as a construction access road. Go to the next slide, please. So Hunter's Ridge is right over here off screen, that these are potential future roads, and again, not what we consider a non-feasible, especially given our meeting, connector temporary roads to Highway 30. Again, not feasible because you'd have to reconstruct Highway 30, and I doubt the county's going to get real excited about that. So now if you want to go back to the first one, and I've just got a couple other things. In the memo that came out with this in the agenda packet, talks about the city doesn't have the funds to pay for it. This isn't city funds. This is developer funds. And just like our ordinance is written to benefit the city in determining what is an allowed and unusual noise, and we had an attorney actually look at the ordinance, and their comment was the way it's written, it gives the city the flexibility to say, we've identified 10. We can add others because of the way it's written. It gives the city flexibility to say we can make changes to what we consider a loud and unusual noise. Doesn't necessarily apply here because that's a different piece that we're working on. But most contracts, and that's why I've put in a data request to get the finished contract for Bellwether and then the city's blank construction contract, because I want to have our attorney go through it and say, where's our flexibility to say we can require Pulte to accelerate this? It's no new money. It's just an acceleration of actually finishing these roads, or at least putting a temporary finish on those roads to carry construction traffic outbound. Talked about that, and then another piece to think about is the tax revenue being generated in Bellwether. And right now, there's very little city involvement in the road network or infrastructure because that's still on Pulte and the developer. So there's lots of tax revenue coming in from Bellwether, and the city's expenditures in Bellwether are probably on the lower end of the spectrum because of that. So Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but like 102nd, even though it's got the final course of asphalt, will be a Pulte plowed and maintained road this winter because it hasn't been turned over. And I don't know if there's been any progress made on the first edition roads being turned over, but I don't think so.
We are plowing the first edition, and we're plowing that up to Ski Road in the second edition.
Yep. So, but it won't come down our road.
It won't go west because we don't want to turn around.
Yeah. So we're in the very, very early stages of the city taking over some of the maintenance inside the development. So I was told that in the contract for Pulte and the development was that there was no construction traffic to be put on Hunter's Ridge Road. That was a request of the city. Pulte, I'm sure, didn't volunteer and say, hey, we don't want to use it. That was a city request. That means that we can direct the contractor to do anything we choose to. I'm not advocating that we want to punish those poor folks that live on Hunter's Ridge. But if we could alleviate 50% of that traffic by moving them in the same entrance and out this one, that would make a great compromise, because our neighbors won't be happy and the folks on Hunter's Ridge won't be happy. And by definition, that's a good compromise because nobody's happy. But it's going to be way better for us than what we currently have to face, which if you spend time there, and we had company over the last few weeks, and so we're sitting out front a lot. Every truck that comes in, you suspend conversation and wait until they go away, and that's every 5 minutes. And again today, every dump truck that came through decided that engine braking was their best course of action, coming to the stop sign right in front of our house. And at least we can do is stop the engine braking. But for moving construction traffic, we highly recommend and ask the city and the council to look at finishing the exit through Hunter's Ridge, bringing in the full trucks through Stieg Road onto 102nd, taking the empty trucks out to 116 through Hunter's Ridge. Are there any questions or, yes, Jeremy?
Can you clarify, Mr. Espelin, the nature of the traffic? Are these dump trucks hauling dirt? Is this cabinetry vans? What are you seeing?
So we see in the neighborhood of 100 personal vehicles, workers coming in. We see an additional 25 to 50 worker vans. The folks from Sabre Plumbing, the Manor Electric, all the different people coming in. When there is a lot of soil being moved as they get ready to build, then it's dump trucks, and we're not talking regular dump trucks, we're talking extended length dump trucks. When they were doing these roads and they were working on these 2 Saturdays ago, and there were probably 10, what I would call 18-wheelers full of dirt lined up on Stieg Road waiting for 6:30, which is still a half hour before 7. And they start coming in and they pull all the way through, they start backing up, they start dumping, and then they come out. And it is a constant, probably, I would say, if you think of 20 dump trucks an hour coming in and the same 20 going out. And that's from 7 to 7. Now, not quite, it's probably 6:30 to 4:30 that the trucks are heavily coming in. Workers tend to leave anywhere between 4 and 7. And then, of course, you've got the fuel truck that comes and fills everybody up at 9 o'clock at night. And they're in a hurry. So when they take that corner off of Stieg Road, they're almost in my neighbor's front yard because they're taking that corner at speed. And when it's dark and we have our dog out, that's a concern. So again, it was surprising to me when our contact into MnDOT, when we described the situation, showed them what was going on, and their first thought was, that shouldn't be, it's a safety hazard, having only one entrance and that tight of a turn for all those vehicles. So we go back up one slide if you could. So the biggest trucks actually have to turn in the exit because they can't make this corner. And as Kevin and Matt know, I've been threatening all sorts of interesting approaches, but if we line cars up on both sides of the street as close as possible to the entrance, we can effectively block off 102nd Place. Now, we don't want to do that, but we need the help of the city to get something done. Mm-hmm. We're working with Matt and his team to solve the after hours or pre-hours construction, which has been brutal. And unfortunately, communication, as we all know, never goes as we think. Some of the officers weren't aware that construction hours had changed, and I'm pretty sure none of the contractors know, because I think Kevin and I know that Pete Eckenberg had also said, well, they had talked to some of the folks at Pulte up in the sales center. Most people could care less about people living there anymore. They're there to sell houses. So I've given them CJ Curtis Johnson, CJ's number. He's the VP of construction for Minnesota. He's the guy that needs to be engaged with this. because he's the person who can make these changes. And all the communication has to go through him. So he's got to be letting the workers know what's going on. And I think it should be, I don't want to give any tickets to any of the drivers, any of the workers. That just seems counterproductive. I just want to hold Pulte's feet to the fire and say, you know, we catch you once, $500 fine. When we get to the fourth one, that $10,000 fine is going to hurt. And you're going to change your behavior. And that's what we want, is we want behavior changed.
Mr. Mayor, if I could ask, if you lived on Hunter's Ridge
Yep.
and you came to the city back before Pulte was
Yep.
even doing this,
Yep.
we don't want that, and the city made those promises. Hunter's Ridge isn't gonna go through until development comes that way.
Yep.
How do you expect us to deal with that?
Yep.
From
And-
previous administrations and those kind of things?
Yep, great question. There is a state approach that says a previous administration cannot make a law that the following administration can't change.
I understand those.
I'm getting there. Give me a
But the
minute.
agreement is with Pulte, and the complaint is with
Yep.
Pulte.
Mhm.
For us to open up that and such, Pulte's got to be here, in my mind, to talk with us about these issues. I'm absolutely listening. I understand. I just talked about 2 weeks of 40 dump trucks
Yep.
per hour down a road that is gravel, not even paved and such. It is something that is devastating to neighbors, and the developers got to get way more involved than they are.
Don't
And
disagree.
I'll make
That's-
some calls,
that's not
too,
us
on
as
my
residents. That's on our city.
But when Pulte talks, they talk about the purchase agreements and all of this, all of these documents are all there. None of this was there in front of you guys.
If it was never pointed out, and I dug through all that stuff.
Okay.
And, you know, again, the idea that construction is going to go on for another year or so is
Oh,
really
it's gonna
different
be
than
a while.
construction going on for 4 or 5 years.
It's gonna go on even longer.
Yep,
Yeah.
and so that's the reason we're looking for a compromise, because I feel horrible for the Hunter's Ridge piece. That's why I'd rather do the second one coming in off of Stieg Road on the edge of Amberley. I'd much rather do that, because that's much less
It
disruptive.
would be less impact, but again, those property owners west of that proposed road,
Yeah, and there's.
all
if
talked
we go
about-
down to, one more. There's one house here, and there's really nothing else, because there's farm field.
I'm grossly aware, I've talked to many of these neighbors about construction traffic building the current Pulte, and as I stated, it's a public road, it's public roads. There is a huge safety issue, and I understand that. But how do you go back, and if you were one of those residents in Hunter's Ridge, what would you be saying? I'm disappointed that nobody's on from them. Did they get a notification of this, or we aren't obligated to notify them?
It was a resident request, so we didn't,
There's nothing to notice,
Okay.
really.
there's nothing formal to notice. It was just a request to have the discussion.
Yeah, okay.
And so, and I, again, there's, what, 10 homes on Hunter's Ridge on our side, or on the east side of 116, something like that. They hit 10 homes before they get halfway down the block on 102nd.
Well, I know, I'm aware of that, but I'm just saying, we put low-density residential next to rural residential. Is that what we put next to? And in past administrations, the conversation has always been, we aren't going to impact those neighbors and such. So it's quite a conundrum, so.
Chairman?
I'm seeing several issues here that I think we can find ways to take action on. The first one with construction hours excursions. I understand that the Pulte subcontractors may not know what the hours are, and I know we can't compel Pulte to put up a sign to tell them, but can we put up a city sign on Stieg and other adjacent areas to notice that? Second, can we update the ordinances to add escalating fines?
So, yes, we are We are exploring different options specifically to try to handle the issue of, Joe Schmo just doing as he's told, being the one that's the creator of the sound, so they'd be fine from a police aspect, to actually holding the ultimate umbrella of Pulte responsible. Talking with the city attorney, we do think there may be some options within the development agreement. Going forward, the issue being there is no template for this that we can refer to. I asked the city attorney if he's aware of any cities that have some kind of enforcement clause for construction hours, and he was not. So it would be something unique that we have yet to really, it's definitely part of the discussion that it's ongoing. And we are aware of the limitations that we have for enforcement. It's not going to be something we can establish, I would say, overnight. It's going to be.
It'll be a process.
Yeah.
I think if we put a sign up and we start giving warnings, if in a month we're not seeing improvement, I think even finding the lower level folks who are repeatedly there and we're seeing and we're warning and they're being told, hey, you've got to come in by 6:30. At some point,
Yes.
that could escalate.
And that is our process. The process is to first educate, and then if we come back and it's the same person, then they would be fine. That is our current process. So we're trying to kind of balance that and inform of the hours, knowing that while I asked Pulte to inform all their contractors on multiple occasions that there's some breakdown in communication. So we're again trying to have a balanced approach with empathy towards the workers who are trying to put food on their table.
Yep, absolutely.
And we're trying to work with Matt's team to make sure we are getting the neighborhood to call for the after-hours piece, so that at least we can record it. And I know there's Nate and myself are two that call on a regular basis. And as I told Matt and Mayor McKee at our last meeting, is that if I'm the only one calling, I'm not going to be a voice in the wilderness for very long. But if we can get other neighbors to express their concern, because quite frankly, the only thing that bothers us anymore is the trucks, and the construction noise bothers us. It's far enough away from us, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the trucks and the J-breaking and everything else is just obnoxious.
Yeah.
So the other thing I was going to suggest, I had a long list.
Go for it.
Can we add a speed bump on Stieg before that turn to slow those trucks down?
That's a Kevin question.
That's gonna add more shaking.
And a Matt question.
Yeah, I don't think that would.
Gonna
be
add more
good.
booms.
Yeah, it's because where the final course ends on 102nd, right where 103rd breaks off to the north, that's the loudest place outside the J-braking, is when they hit that bump, especially when it's a big truck. And it's worse when they're empty and coming out because they're accelerating. And they hit that bump going out, and Nate lives right across from the bump, and he's hearing it all through the house. The other part that is concerning, and I don't know how to solve this, is the stop sign. About 50% of the construction workers blow through the stop sign. They're not even pretending to stop. Probably 5% of the neighbors do the same thing. I'm okay with a roll through, but the accelerate from my driveway to get through the stop sign because I don't see anybody, that's a problem. And again, that's a safety hazard. So when we get another 100 homes, they're all going to be back there. So now you've got 100 homes times 1.75 cars, in addition to the 120 homes that are there now, and all the construction traffic. Now you're really looking at a potential debacle.
I'm thinking the long, low bumps that, I agree, something that's really sharp and hard, you wouldn't want to see that increase in noise, but I'm wondering if there's a way you can use traffic calming approaches to deal with that and force it to be a safer intersection.
I think generally that roadway was designed to be a local collector road for moving
Yep.
traffic from neighborhoods. I think when they talk about, roadway design obviously is the biggest part about traffic traveling. I think there's certain specifications for local collector roads that I think was followed as it relates to width and speed, turn lanes, access. So I'm guessing, I would be confident saying that since we don't generally recommend speed bumps even on the local roadways, that a collector road would probably be not advised by the traffic engineers, but that would be something we'd have to ask.
I think we've had a similar conversation on Gleason as well, and that was what the feedback was. So that different.
Yeah, you guys are dealing with it still
Yep.
with Ravinia and stuff, everything that's in
Yep.
deep and stuff, you've got a lot of that traffic too. Matt, Craig had mentioned that our police force doesn't know and understand the start and end construction times and stuff like that. I would expect that to be,
Yeah, one of our part-time officers who just came back from.
didn't know
Didn't
since it
know-
changed, okay.
Didn't know
All right.
have the updated time, so. he-
Otherwise, everybody else is well aware.
Yep, they've also gotten 2 different emails on it. So.
And we've encouraged them, and Matt's been very gracious about, you know, on occasion, we'll have an officer that's already back there at 6:30 watching things going on. And they tend to come in a little bit before closing time. And again, it's closer to shift change, so it's a little bit more awkward, because you can't just say, okay, get in your car and just run up there. We get that. But like I said, this report from tonight will go out to our entire community, make sure that folks that are hearing this, the out of work hours noise or calling, and that's a separate work stream. This one is really about how do we reduce the amount of traffic coming off 102nd Place? Is there a way? And if there is, how do we get there?
You've got no answers from anybody at Pulte.
I won't
Obviously, the
deal with
people at the-
Pulte on this, because none of the Pulte people that I know of, even Curtis, not his rodeo.
I
It's
can
gotta go
get you in
through
touch
Curtis
with,
to get to president of Pulte, Minnesota.
I can get you in touch with the head of land entitlement, land development on the here that we've
And-
dealt
and
with.
My question then is, what's the city's responsibility to help out a resident versus a residence to tilt at the windmill of Pulte Group LLC?
I think it depends on what is being violated. Is there anything in the development agreement that would regulate any of this that the city can use as leverage?
So we specifically told them to not connect to Hunter's Ridge.
Well, just to state that we're all talking about the same thing, but the development contract, if you recall, Van Blaircom wasn't part, it was Newman West and the Schoberg pieces. So what is now Newman West or Bellwether 8th, the part that's immediately east of the existing Hunter's Ridge, that was isolated in the original Bellwether development approvals, right? It was isolated by the wetland, the floodplain. And so what the development contract said was that was always their last phase. They were going counterclockwise. What the development agreement says is if we basically verbally told them at the staff level that we don't want construction traffic going through existing neighborhoods. That's always been a
Right.
council policy. But to get around that was if you can't, we recommended, reaching out to adjacent landowners and purchasing a access easement to go across their property. We didn't put in there that you were forced to say the Van Blaircom piece, which is now Bellwether Ambley. We didn't say you have to acquire property. We said if you use Hunter's Ridge for traffic, you now have to do an overlay. So the condition in the agreement was, we have turn lanes that we're going to be constructing at 160 and Hunter's Ridge. That got initiated and the escrow got put in place earlier this year when we approved Bellwether 8th. So we're in design for that. That'll likely be constructed next year. And that's because of Hennepin County's requirement that an ultimate system, that's one of the 3 legs into a community, right? When you box an area out and it's developing, you're going to want those points of entry. So what the development agreement says, the original one, it says if you have to use, or choose to use Hunter's Ridge, it's discouraged, but if you have to use it because there was no other way to develop that land, it says that then you'd have to do an overlay on it. So it's an add or. In the meantime, Pulte acquired the Van Blaircom piece. They now can access not through Hunter's Ridge. So if they continue to choose to not access them through Hunter's Ridge, they don't have that project obligation. If we direct them to send construction traffic down Hunter's Ridge, they're gonna say, I'm not doing it unless you waive this clause. And then we have the risk of the residents there and the change condition from when it was approved.
Yeah, I'd like to keep our promises. I meant more, is there anything that they are violating in terms of how they're running construction traffic or how they're violating noise ordinance?
In the development contract, it would just be being able to catch them in some code violation.
Weight restrictions, anything like that?
and it's a liberal interpretation of the noise ordinance. Because a liberal interpretation would be driving into the neighborhood before 7 is loud and unusual noise relative to what the neighborhood experiences. The city has that ability to interpret it that way, based on what our attorney has told us from his review of the ordinance.
I think that certainly applies to 18-wheel dump trucks.
Absolutely.
Personal cars, probably not, but
Yep.
I think there's something we could do there to help.
Well, and the other thing that I would recommend for the city to
Want to speak?
think about for a development like this in the future, build outside or inside out, start
Yeah.
in the back. Because now, how long does it take for us to become an existing neighborhood? Because technically, we've been here a year and a half. You're violating your own promise to not disrupt existing neighborhoods.
Well, it's,
It was a full-blown development.
Well, no, I understand.
You're
But our
splitting
neighborhood-
hairs and such. It's always, I was told before I was even on this, that the developers all told the neighborhood, this is all gonna develop, this is what's gonna happen, and it was all in the purchase agreements and those kind of
We were told that Hunter's
things.
Ridge was gonna be the southern entrance and was gonna be used as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's.
by Pulte?
Is that in writing?
No. No, there's stuff that's in writing that they won't do.
Yeah,
I'd bring that up with the attorney, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've already, we've actually talked to Pulte about that because they committed to if there were more than 400 lots or homes built, they would add additional amenities, which done another information request for, because they've told us that the Prairie Center was enlarged to account for 514 home sites. I think that's some sort of South End bull stuff. My guess is it's the same size as when it started.
It's terrible that it's a huge cul-de-sac. And I've always made comments like that before I got on here. And these are just huge cul-de-sacs with one entrance, those kind of things.
And that's
It's
a-
painful to that neighborhood that's getting built and then from start to finish, that whole neighborhood.
And if it started the other
Crazy.
way, as you build, traffic stops. Build, traffic stops. Now it's, the more
Yeah.
you build, the more traffic we get.
And I think
People
part
at
of
the
that,
very end get the least traffic.
Yep.
I think part of that, to kind of what you were talking about, Kevin, is of the there was the original Bellwether, then the Van Blaricom, and the other parcels that came in separately
And
later.
the phasing is, we only
Done
get
within
what
each.
what they propose for platting, so we're,
But again.
It's
here's
usually
the-
dictated by where the sewer pipe is.
Yep.
Because it's cost-driven, and so it's the sewer pipe, and in this case, the sewer came basically through Steeg Road, that intersection we're talking about is where the sewer, trunk sewer route is. So they, it's basically a little bit, it's economic, but usually it's where the sewer is, and then they always had, we don't tell them how to phase out a project, we never have.
Right.
We can evaluate if we can, but it's typically driven by where they want to set up their big facility, and it's infrastructure driven. And with this specific case, I would presume because they didn't want to, if there was a way for them to acquire that property, and they didn't have to use Hunter's Ridge, they would hold off on that piece until they could do that, because that was a business decision, right? If you're just looking at it and how you build it out. We don't say, here's a phase, you have to stick to it. We allow, once it's platted, that's your addition, but we don't get into how many homes are built with each phase. I think that would be unique to, but, not saying it probably couldn't be done, but that, we don't get into how much they build or where they build as long as they meet the conditions that were set forth in the original preliminary
Yeah.
And I think the only alternative I would suggest is that, as you look at this, think about customer experience for the folks that are there already, like we talked about with some of the older folks or the longtime residents on Hunter's Ridge. As you approve those additions, put in the construction agreement, building temporary construction roads. Put it in, you can negotiate it out if you can, but put it in as a base. So that's like, how are we gonna not disrupt the lives of everybody that already moved in if phase 8 was never gonna be there? Well, if it is, what are you doing about it? Not you, but Pulte. And you can say, we require a temporary construction road. something so we're not constantly disrupting the people
Yeah,
who now become.
we saw this in Ravinia. This previous administration and such, we've got some Ravinia neighborhood, or neighbors there and stuff. It is part of this. I've experienced it for 35, 37 years, living in Maple Grove and seeing the developments come and multiple entrances, those kind of things. There's been some that have just been log cul-de-sacs.
Yep.
And cities have just basically said, that's part of progress, part of development, and it's got to be handled. So a recommendation or a suggestion, you're already talking with an attorney, and there's got to be something, a lot of the verbals and those kind of things that Pulte's given you, there's got to be some information there someplace.
But see, that's again where we
I
have
think
no pull with Pulte anymore. Because Pulte could care less about people who live in Corcoran. They're interested in building homes in Corcoran. They do not care about a single resident in Corcoran. And I can't make that clear enough to the
I
city.
believe you, because I've had similar experiences in my neighborhood with builders who
With your developer.
leave garbage everywhere,
Yep.
block sidewalks, block roads.
We had one resident move out less than a year after he bought a home in Bellwether because
Yeah.
they wouldn't stop putting construction materials on the right-of-way
It's
that
been
looked like his yard.
a battle we've had a lot.
Yep. And so this is where I think the city, specifically the staff and the council and mayor can guide this. If we understand these are problems, there are solutions before we sign in any documents. The construction documents can be built to say, you can't do these things, you've got to mitigate these things. If it doesn't apply, scratch it off. If it does apply, check the box. How are you going to do it?
And the big thing there is I think that definitely affects, like you mentioned, future developments that come in. And I'm more than happy to try to dig into that, and
Yep.
I'd be happy to follow up with you. And if there's examples you can find, I'll certainly start looking for some. If there's language that we can add that we think is legally defensible and has been done before, or is just something that we think we can do, I'm more than happy to try to add it.
Yep, and it's something as simple as if you are driving through an existing neighborhood from the same development to build out the rest, you've got to do these things. I mean, these are simple, and if they're in the agreement and they agree to them, they don't have to be legally defensible. They signed it. Signing it makes it legally defensible. It's as legally defensible as saying, well, we're not going to let people drive on Hunter's Ridge. So, I'd really ask you guys to look into this, because the way that companies like Pulte work, if you had told them to build the road infrastructure all the way back to Hunter's Ridge in the beginning, guess what? They would have done it. They would have bitched about it. They would have done it.
I would disagree with that.
Yeah.
Honestly, they've done more than that on roads that they have ended up being responsible for. And it's been, roads in particular with developers are a very hot button
I can
issue.
tell you that they've built so many temporary roads and parking areas in Bellwether that the asphalt would have covered Hunter's Ridge 4 times over.
Very well could be.
So if they're telling you that, they're telling you a lie. They're
Yeah, but
telling you
it-
because they don't want to spend the money when it's not in their convenience.
But again, the side of those landowners, those property owners that live on Hunter's Ridge, if you were one of them, what would you be saying right now?
I'd probably be empathetic for the poor bastards up on 102nd.
But don't put construction traffic down my road.
Well, but if I'm only getting 50% and they're almost all empty, yeah.
Yeah,
I get it.
I do.
How would you enforce that?
You can't
Just
enforce
it's the
that.
flow. You can enforce it, but if you tell them this is the flow,
No.
it's going to go that way.
We had the same problem on Stieg Road of trying to get no traffic off of 116 on a gravel road through those neighborhoods. All traffic for Pulte was supposed to come off of 101 in Stieg and then in.
It didn't.
That didn't happen there. We could not say no because it was a public street. It was a public road. So very empathetic towards your situation and stuff, but there's only so much we can do, and to just open up Hunter's Ridge until development is done and such.
Well, and I've told the neighbors that we may only get to solving something for the future. That may be the best we can do.
Yeah.
I don't want that to be the best we can do, because I know we can do better. But if that's all we can do, okay.
Let's talk about some of the specifics that we can do. So, does staff agree it's okay to put up a construction hours sign on right-of-way off of, say, Stieg?
I think we'll have to look into creating the sign.
Yeah, we haven't created the sign, and we'll just need to look at that and figure out where those funds would come from, but I think.
I'd make a motion to
And we'll be
direct staff
talking
to
every
look into
develop-
that.
We just have to
Second.
develop an implementation plan, because we'll be talking, every development needs, are we doing one sign, every entrance, every development? All developments are just significant, like.
Always
we wouldn't
I would
bring
say we
back like
we
a-
construct a sign, and when there's a need, we erect it at staff discretion. In this case, it seems like it would make sense to have one by Bellwether. Or we can have a template and fabricate them as we need them. I don't think it has to go everywhere.
The motion I'll make then will be to direct staff to create the verbiage, create a sign, implementation plan, follow up with council on the actual implementation and cost.
And I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Second point I think we can address is engine braking. Can that be part of the same requirement? Or is that something, I know we talked about, sorry, we didn't talk, before I was on council, that was discussed when Nelson went into place. And the council at the time opted not to actually put in the ordinance that they said they would put in at the initial approval meeting. I think there was some staff guidance on that, but I wasn't privy to it because I wasn't on council then. Does anybody here know what that was about?
Yeah, we had talked a little bit about engine braking and what the, what the impacts would be and on the different roadways and stuff. And I think it was, at the time, it was discussed that
If you
a
don't
lot
want
of
to
cities
speak.
were going away from it at the time. And I think just based on the changes in vehicle advancements and things like that, because that was one of the concerns or discussion points about the one on 101. I think certainly cities can implement no engine braking ordinances, and you see some of them do that. I think it gets a little bit more challenging, especially when you're, when you're looking at the volume of truck traffic coming off of the Brockton interchange and things like that and serving an industrial area, but I think it's certainly something that can be looked into more, and we can bring back a little more information if that's something the council wants to spend time on.
I'd be curious to hear more on it.
I'd like to see us do it. I mean, I know some cities do have it. I know you can't enforce it every time somebody uses their engine brake, but if there's a specific area where we tend to see a lot of it, at least gives you the tools to try to enforce and break those chronic bad habits that those truck drivers might develop.
What can we do to involve Pulte? I mean, it's their neighborhood, it's their development, I see it as ultimately their promise to the
I can
homeowners,
certainly-
those kind of things. I always get back to that good neighbor type deal. They aren't being a good neighbor at all.
I know staff, we've had some conversations about trying to figure out what we need in terms of framework to be able to hold Pulte accountable for things like the hours violations and stuff like that, or not, and to be fair, not just Pulte, any developer.
Yep.
We've had issues with other developers in town.
So I think that's one piece, looking at future development agreements is another piece. And, I think we could certainly try to set up a meeting with
Yeah.
them. Maybe that's
what we do next step is I'll
At least try to-
have a meeting with Paul and see what progress can be made.
What are the specific things we want them to try to change?
I think it's primarily around,
Construction traffic.
Construction.
They'd made comments on the next development. What are you doing on construction traffic? The comments in the past have been the residents that are there understand and know that there's going to be construction traffic and noise, and obviously.
yeah, I think that there's the element of that
Number of
of,
people overlooking that, or they did not give that information
Right.
to those landowners or those prior residents.
yep, I think
So
there's an
like-
element of the communication part. There's the current problem of early or late hours and, making sure we can get it to whoever the higher ups are at Pulte or whatever development this is occurring in. And, you know, coming from you or the council directly, I think might help. And
What about speed? Can they do anything about speed?
Speed's not as much of an issue, and Matt's done his best to educate me, and I've got a bit of a hard head when it comes to it. What appears to be faster when you're standing there is usually in that 25 to 35. So it's so subjective unless you got a radar gun.
yeah, it looks fast, but yeah.
It does, and it feels fast when
Yeah.
you're standing there. And, you know, Dean, you talk about empathizing. I empathize with Matt and trying to enforce.
Oh, this is, it goes all the way across, Craig. It is just,
But that's
I'm a-
one that the only thing you can do is maybe put those electronic signs up that tell everybody what they're supposed to be doing and what they actually are. That's your
Yeah.
best bet. You know, for the stop sign, I prefer a harpoon. And if you go to the passenger side, just to save as many people as possible. But other than that, you're not gonna stop the people that, unless, again, Matt, if he hires a full-time resource just to sit there and write tickets on stop signs.
is there another contact other than Paul?
We have a couple.
We can try to dig some up.
I can get you the president of Pulte.
I mean, I think
Sure.
the contact we'd reach
That helps.
out to is who's in the development. I think they have to have a contact identified
Yeah,
in the agreement. That's who we should be contacting. And
They all
if it's
have-
not you.
they all have different people at different stages.
Let's look into that.
So,
Let's look into that, and then we'll set up a meeting. We'll work on those signs.
Escalating
When I, Craig,
fines,
follow up
whatever
about
that would look
some of
like
the
in
language,
Yep.
and that's at least a starting point.
And we talked about escalating fines, if there's a way to do that within
Yep.
the ordinances.
Yep. All the ordinance language, development agreement language, all that type of stuff.
did we replace that speed sign trailer?
No,
We
the
retired the one, did we get another?
sign trailer is set for replacement this year, so we have not gotten a
Haven't
different
gotten it yet.
replacement sign.
And the one that's there is just
Yeah.
not working.
No.
That one died out.
So, and that's actually a sign trailer replacement. One of the things discussions I've had internally is consideration for our city policy going forward, if we consider the speed signs on collectors or, you know, for instance, Gleason Parkway or Stieg. Now, I know that there's always going to be pushback for those developments or who pays for them, but I think, you know, that theme is pretty consistent, whether you're talking about Gleason in Tavera or Stieg Road by Bellwether. I mean, those can be valuable tools just for, if nothing else, for community education, but I think it also makes drivers stop and pay attention
Yeah.
as a good
I'm
reminder.
sure
How
you've seen these,
expensive are
but
those?
they get pretty pricey.
Trailer?
The ones actually on the sign.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've seen those. They have them up in Maple Grove. If you continue on, I don't remember
They're
what
solar
place it's called over
operated
there.
and stuff, yeah.
But whatever the continuation of the road, it's basically the speed limit sign, and then they have the radar one beneath it. I know you and I talked about it a while ago. They were pricey, but maybe it's something we get an actual price on and have a discussion about at some point. Whether it's in the future, you know, whether actually getting them is farther off in the future or not, might be good to know about.
One more thing, Mr. Mayor. Craig, another number that you may want in your file is a residential home generates 10 units per day. Just, I think you said 1.5 or 2 units.
Oh, and it was number of cars, 1.75 cars per unit.
It's 10 trips per home.
Okay.
Just a number that has been out there for a long time,
And that's per day, you say?
per day.
I think that's.
It is probably elevated more than that with all of our delivery friends and all of those things, but when you factor in postal, the
Garbage.
postage, garbage, automobiles, multiple homes, it's a number of 10 units per dwelling.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
And thank you all for listening.
Of course. Thank you for coming in.
Your frustration is well heard,
I
and
get it.
we are a drive-through community, and we got all kinds of this going on, not just in new developments, so.
Understood.
Thank you, guys. Good one.
Thank you.
All right. Now we're on to 10A with the revamped schedule, just to schedule some work sessions. So do those dates work for you too?
Are these the only two that are coming up then? We don't have another one in October?
We do have one October 13th.
already called
We
it.
had already called that one. So the one on
Okay.
October 13th is our 5-year financial management plan. Then we'd have the work session on the ordinances, and then after that, moving forward with the discussion around the stormwater area charge.
I assume we are in conformance with everything, but I have inquiries of people saying we're conducting business outside normal council hours, and it should be something that's public, and I say we have public postings, everything on every work session and those kind of things.
We
so.
notice it on the public notice board and as well as the website. We're only required to publish it on the.
I'm just saying, it's an extension of the council meeting. Am I saying it right? It's published, it's there.
As long as we
It's
call the work
It's
session.
an open work session. Anybody can come.
Yep.
Anybody can comment as long as it's orderly, those kind of things, but
They are,
I mean,
actually, I don't think, there's not a forum for comment.
And we don't have to
generally
accept
have a
comment
forum
at a work
for
session.
comment.
I can allow it.
I'll modify that, but there's people saying we are doing something behind
Would love to have people
doors,
join
and
us.
these are open meetings. You can join online, you can
Yeah.
do
and
whatever,
We have
so.
had people join online. This
We did
is-
today.
We didn't today,
Oh,
which
okay.
was surprising to me, but even in the last, the budget work sessions, we had a few folks on those, so.
And these folks are believing that
Yeah, I know.
budget should be normal council, the numbers, everything's published, and I just say it's all public record, you can look at anything.
And we did,
Give your
have
input.
it, the discussion at the formal, when we approve it, we just generally try to have some, allow for some time for more questions and back and forth.
We're good with everything we do, I will keep passing that on, it's just,
I know for
Wanted
a
to-
fact that one of Michelle's neighbors, who maybe gets the gold star for attendance of all of our meetings, she on?
very much so. Is she?
She knows about all of them, so it is getting out there.
We'd love to have people join, and if
Yep.
anyone wants to look at notices, we definitely do notice those, so be happy to.
Otherwise, no, I have no issues making it.
Good deal. Now we'll go ahead and call work sessions for October 27th and November 10th, 2022 at 5:30 PM. On to 10B, Charter Commission appointments. We have 2 applications for reappointments. I believe Phil Christensen did not.
Phil decided to opt out this renewal
Gotcha.
with his work on the Parks and Trails Commission.
Fair enough. So yeah, do we have any discussion on the 2 applications? This would put us at what, 11?
We thought it would be at 11.
I think I put it in here at one point.
I'd like to see us closer to 15,
9.
but 2 more is good.
Right.
So
That gets us closer.
It would be good to get more people involved. That idea of a pipeline of people who are interested in increasing the level of service
Yeah.
to the city would be wonderful.
Yeah.
But I see no reason to deny either of these 2 finds.
No.
Need a recommendation, or?
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to reappoint Brian Lothar and George Gamak to the Charter Commission. Do we have terms?
So
Do we need
moved.
to specify terms?
Second.
They're 4-year terms, and the judge, at the time of the appointment, will set the dates. I have not found that they're consistent in
Right.
all of the times, the multiple different judges I've worked with. They all do it slightly different. So I just put 4 years in because they'll determine the actual
Perfect.
dates.
I'll entertain a motion to appoint them both to whatever term the judge sets.
Perfect.
Motion, second?
Second, motion, whatever you know.
I'll make a
already did
motion.
I think,
I'll second.
Dean,
I
second.
think Dean second. I thought Nichols second, but maybe not.
We're revising what we
Yeah.
did originally,
Okay,
or it's the same and you're just adding the dates?
sounds good. Got it.
Works. Okay, all
You
those,
motioned, I second, okay.
all those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
10C, Holiday Toy and Food Drive.
Excellent. Joining us virtually is Jessica Christensen to talk about that.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. Thank you for including this on the agenda. I'm coming on behalf of myself and Sergeant Eckenberg with the police department. We are hoping to move forward with the holiday toy and food drive again this year. If you recall, in 2021, we actually ended up having to cancel due to inclement weather. No one anticipated a thunderstorm in December, so we're hoping for better weather this year. Essentially, the gist of it would be we would have a few different cars decorated in lights to go around to local neighborhoods and collect toys for tots and then food for Cross Food Shelf. So we would take those donations and bring them over either the next day or the following week. The anticipated registration form is going to be online. We'll do it similar to Night to Unite, where we have people show their interest by filling out the form, and then we would include them in the route. So at this point, we're just looking for direction on if council wants to move forward with that event again and try for 2022, or if we should just kind of leave it as is.
Gotcha, thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of people were excited about the idea last year, and that was kind of on short notice, where it just kind of came up a month or so beforehand. I think maybe if we get another December thunderstorm on this day, then maybe it's a sign.
Probably stop making this.
But hopefully we're good. I like the idea of the neighborhoods being able to kind of apply like Night to Unite, and we can base the route on that. So yeah, this works for me. The date works for me. December 7th. Anything?
My dog and I were very disappointed we couldn't go last year, so hopefully it'll turn out better this year.
I would love to see Hugo in the parade. Yeah. My two would destroy the parade, so I can't. But we can record it for him. Dean, does that work for you potentially?
It should,
Good deal.
unless I get somebody that's requesting a certain person's presence.
Gotcha. Yeah, and maybe that's a whole different thing when we should.
That's an off.
Yeah. Gotcha.
An off day for me.
Sounds good. I will make a motion to authorize staff to proceed with planning the holiday toy and food drive for Wednesday, December 7th, 2022.
Mayor and Council, I just note that we do have a meeting on the 8th, so just the day after that meeting, or the event, and then unfortunately, I'm flying back from Florida, so I may not be, depending on if there are any delays, I may
You're in
not be
Florida.
able to join Disney World.
I will not be here that week.
I might be in Colorado.
So we might have not all of the folks at this.
Maybe we need a different date.
Yeah.
But we do have the rest of a good a group of staff that might be able to, that we feel could attend.
Maybe Jessica should think about
We will.
if she gets the right mix of people to make it happen. I would be open to other dates too.
Yeah, and we can be flexible, I'm sure. Authorize planning it, and if we need to change dates, just bring it back to us.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I did make the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. 10D, election results canvassing date. So I will, you guys both familiar with purpose of this meeting, or after the election to canvass the election results?
It's our chance to protect democracy.
Yep. I unfortunately will not be there. We just need a quorum.
We just need a quorum. In the past, if this is the only thing, depending on, how it all goes, it can be a very brief meeting, 10 minutes or less, depending on how quickly we can talk through things with write-in results and other items. But generally, a brief meeting. It just happens to fall in with the holiday on the 11th.
Yeah, I always
And
forget
the
about
weekend, it makes it 5 days to canvass the election, so between the 14th and the 18th, and we could look at a different time. 7 is generally when we have meetings, but if it'd be easier to do a 5 o'clock or a different time, we could look at a different time. We have not heard from we believe this date will work. I reached out to the county and asked them. Last year, they didn't due to the pandemic, they were having a lot of last election, they were having a lot of ballots come in late with absentee.
They might not have had it by the 11th.
So they needed to move it a little bit later in the process, but as of Friday, they were not anticipating that, so I think we can set it, and if we do need to move it, we can, certainly get that out in front of council and the public. for the date change if we needed to.
Gotcha.
I think 5 o'clock would be good for me personally.
June, would that work for you?
14th, 15th would be good, anytime.
Okay. Like I said, I won't be there, so if we want to do 5 o'clock on, Jeremy, any preference, 14th or 15th?
14th, can't work on the 15th.
Okay,
Can't work here on the 15th.
How many people do we need?
just
We
3.
just need 3. I have not, it sounded like Alan said that he could make the date of the 14th work, and Fatima and I have only exchanged text messages and have not gotten
Gotcha.
on this topic, so.
Good. Just need one. I'll go ahead and call it for, call the meeting for November 14th at 5 o'clock PM. And if we need to change it due to who can make it, we can cancel it and call anyone. And we got through everything. So, staff reports, active planning projects update, anything? A lot of stuff going on?
Still a lot going on, and I'm anticipating to see more coming up.
Sounds good. City council schedule, busy coming up as well. Other than that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Recording stop.